Hello, kiddies. It's your old pal John Kassir, the voice of the Crypt Keeper. And I hope you get to check out my good fiends at A Decade of Horror on the PSVG Podcast Network. I hope you love them like I do. They're a scream.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
What's up, ghouls and ghosts? My name is Donnie Reese, and thank you for tuning in to the third episode of PSVG's A Decade of Horror, the latest podcast on the PSVG Podcast Network, where we will live the year that 2012 was in horror. The Scream team is back. That means Lucas and Josh, you're still with me, haven't given up on us yet. How are both of you?
Decent.
Wow. Before we get into it, I wanted to ask you guys, so we've done 2 episodes. What do you guys think so far?
We did okay.
We did okay. That's good.
I think
good job, listeners.
We learned some lessons, and now we're back to prove our worth.
The lesson that I learned in editing the show was when I was detailing the reef. For whatever reason, I said the word Alaska instead of Australia, and those are very different places. And one of those things don't have sharks. Although, I will admit, I thought if there was an Alaskan movie with sharks, that would be pretty cool.
They have those.
They have ice sharks?
Yeah, the ones that live below the. They're not Greenland sharks, but they're the same type of shark as like Greenland sharks.
That's terrifying.
They just found one.
So if you fall through the ice in Alaska, you may not die just from hypothermia. You could also be eaten to death by sharks.
Well, I mean, they don't move very fast because the water is so cold, so you're probably okay. You'll die from hypothermia.
So it's
first.
like a slow zombie situation where they just kind of slowly creep towards you.
Don't give the Sci-Fi Channel any ideas, please.
Hold on. I bet Alaska shark movie. Alaskan killer shark nature documentary. Okay. Ice Sharks, the trailer.
So when I misspoke, it wasn't a misspeaking at all, actually. I was just being honest. I was trying to bring awareness to the plight that is the Alaskan shark.
There you go.
The Icy Killers, Secrets of Alaska's Salmon Shark.
We'll cover that in the next episode of A Decade.
Nailed it, Donnie.
But yeah, I really enjoyed our first 2 episodes. So I'm hoping that our listeners, I hope you guys are enjoying it. I hope you're sticking with us. And I'm very excited to record this episode and the next episode because as I alluded to when we left off in 2011, this is the year that I think horror movies begin to pick up. And especially in our next episode, it is a banger, stellar year. And I'm very, very excited to talk it out. But Josh, why don't you set the time in the DeLorean back to 2012 and let us know. Let's go ahead and set the mood.
Now I tried to make it more positive, but I can't. I'm not going to deny that bad shit happened in 2012. When you think of 2012, does anything stick in your mind?
The movie
for things
2012
that happened that year. And I don't think that movie came out in the year 2012.
Oh, okay. Shows how much I know. No,
it was shown at the Cannes Film Festival in 2011, and then came out in 2013.
Wow.
Came out in 2009.
That's the only thing I think of when I think of 2012 is I just think of like that being, the whole, was it Nostradamus or was it Mayans? Or
well, move adjacent to your thought right now.
Like
move adjacent to your thought process. So all you can think of is the movie 2012. Why do you think that is? I'll tell you. It's
okay.
Fine. We'll get to it.
I'm like, because it's called 2012? I'm scared to answer, Josh.
Why did they think the world was ending in 2012?
Because the calendar stopped, right? The Mayan calendar.
There you go.
Right.
Nailed it.
Right.
So the Mayan calendar ended, and we all just thought it's kind of like when we thought the year 2000 was going to make all of the computers flip out, and
Yes.
It was not
we
a
were
deal.
so naive.
You got it. We basically created the events of a horror movie in our own minds, and nothing happened for 2012.
Here we
Not
are. We think
necessarily
we think we're so
2000.
high and mighty for the world. Our society's so live, but we were scared.
We do.
The computers couldn't do 00.
Here's the answer.
Without thinking it was 1900, yeah.
Never worry about anything.
So let's start off. We have the first Hunger Games film is released in the year
Wow.
2012.
Okay.
We are introduced to Gangnam Style.
Ah.
Wedding parties will never be the same.
Can you guys guess on what might have been number one on the Billboard charts?
Oh boy.
It was Someone That I Used to Know by Gautier.
Wow. I didn't even know that
Gangnam Style's a lot
got
better.
that high.
Call Me Maybe hits the airwaves that same
Yay.
year. Well, okay. So there was a shooting in Aurora, Colorado.
Oh.
that
Not
we all
yay.
know too well. I'm not
Mhm.
gonna get crazy on details. The Curiosity rover lands on Mars.
Awesome.
Marvel's Avengers not only comes out in theaters, but takes the number one spot for the year for the box office. Hurricane Sandy wreaks havoc on the East Coast, killing hundreds.
Now we got two of them.
Yep, there you go. They're coming. Barack Obama is reelected. I'm just going ups and downs. Sandy Hook.
Yeah, you are.
The year that the Mayan calendar ends. Facebook goes public at $38 a share.
Should have bought.
It is currently trading at $267.01 per share. Whitney Houston dies.
Wow.
Wow.
Neat.
I thought that was far longer back, I guess.
We have an NHL lockout.
Yeah, yeah.
Disney buys Lucasfilm.
Ah.
And then the worst, no, I shouldn't say that because now
You said
I
two
make
really
every-
awful things.
Yeah.
I make everything sound like not as bad, and that was stupid of me to say. So erase what I just said.
Okay.
The New York Giants win the Super Bowl.
Okay.
The San Francisco Giants win the World Series. The LA Kings win the Stanley Cup, and the Miami Heat win the NBA championship. That is 2012 in a nutshell.
It had its
Ups and downs.
ups and downs. Yeah. A real roller coaster of emotions on that one.
Yeah, 2012 was a rough year. I actually left out a lot of other things in both years that we're going to be discussing.
I feel like that was the year I bought my first house, I think. Because that's what I remember when I think of Sandy Hook was we just moved into our first home.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a memory.
Crazy.
It's a terrible memory to have, but it's like
Yeah.
it's so jarring, you know, like they're synonymous with each other.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
Lucas, pick the show up, man. Let's talk scary movies.
Sure. Let's move away from that. You know, as we talk about these things, the sooner, the more closer to where we are now we get, the less I'll feel like my memory has just been destroyed over time because I don't remember half of this stuff or when it happened or anything. So thanks for that, Josh. Let's talk movies.
Hey, you gave me this job, you guys.
I don't know how you guys are going to feel about this. So
Well,
top
hang on a
three.
second. Hang on. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you here.
Sure.
We should have talked about this when we were reliving the first two episodes. If the listeners haven't picked up yet, which they definitely should have, we don't go over notes.
Clearly.
We don't know what the other person's going to say. We don't know what movies they're bringing, what events. Like, it's all off the spur. So hopefully, listeners, as you're listening to and some of these thoughts that Josh is bringing up are jogging your memories, we're right here along for the ride with you. That's the whole point of A Decade of Horror, is to jump back in the chair. So carry on, Lucas.
Carry on, your wayward son. Top three grossing horror movies of 2012. Number 3, The Woman in Black. Grossing in at $54.33 million.
That's a lot of money for that movie.
Yes, with a Metascore of 62. Now, I never saw
That's
this movie.
better than I thought. I've seen it. I didn't like it, but
I
It gets the
remember
Daniel
people talking
Radcliffe
about it. Yeah,
Gets the
that's
Harry
the
Potter
thing.
dry, yeah.
I was gonna say this was like one of the first major things that he was in after
Except
the
for
Harry
Equus.
Potters.
Yeah, he did Equus, and then he did this.
What was the Horns? When did Horns
Horns
come
was
out?
after
Okay.
this.
Okay, so number 3. Number 2, Underworld Awakening at $62.32 million. What number is? Let's see.
I mean,
That wasn't the Kate Beckinsale one, right? That was the other one.
The other one. Let's see. What
Oh, it was
number
Kate
is it
Beckinsale,
though?
sorry.
It was it her last one though?
No. This was the second one?
I mean, I'm just gonna
I
say
thought it was the third.
vampires are very popular.
Oh, yeah, this is the third one. You're right.
Yeah, and then you throw in some werewolves because no one's ever done vampires versus werewolves.
They're lichens, buddy.
Oh, excuse me. Sorry. Well, I'm not a liking that movie. Metascore 39, in case I didn't say that.
That joke gets a Metascore 99. Good job.
Thank you.
That joke is definitely better than the movie.
Now here's the real question.
Ooh.
Maybe we'll get into it. Number 1, top grossing by almost $20 million.
I know it.
The Johnny Depp
Nope.
classic.
I was wrong.
I know it. Nope. Instant backpedal. Never mind. Dark Shadows.
Boo.
Really?
79.7 million. Johnny Depp, man. Coming off from those pirate adventures.
Oh, those pirate
Hot
movies
commodity.
are good.
Yeah.
I've never seen that movie.
I never. Dark Shadows?
Yeah.
Neither. I actually was going to watch it because I wanted to see. It's a horror comedy movie.
Yes. Now I just looked up the box cover, and it reminded me why I've never seen it. I judged it off, I think, its initial trailer, and was like, I'm not going to watch that. And
Well,
and I
it's a
never did.
vampire movie too.
I don't like vampires.
It's like
Normally.
what? It
It
appears.
might as well be Mordecai. They look like the same exact movie.
That's true. It appears to be a spoof of Dracula, Bram Stoker's Bram Stoker. That's a different film.
I
hardly know
have
him.
I have 6 movies that made my list, 3 that I'll offer, and none of them made your top 3.
Wow. You know what? I don't feel bad about that. So that just tells you why we're here now.
Yeah.
Because I was going to watch this movie to see, did it earn the number 1 spot or did everyone just throw their money away? But it is no longer streaming. It used to be. Josh and I were talking about how difficult it's been. I remember seeing Dark Shadows, Underworld movies, The Woman in Black. All of these things were on Netflix or Hulu or Prime, whatever, Amazon Prime, but not. Suddenly they're disappeared. Right before Halloween season. Where did they go? I don't know.
Yeah.
Made room for newer movies, I guess. But yeah, you can't watch them now unless you pay for it. So I guess I'll have to wait and see if Dark Shadows was worth the number 1 spot later. Maybe we'll come back around in the end episodes and I can say I've seen it.
Did either of you have any of those movies on your list?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Not even close for me.
No, I was muted. I just wanted to make sure you heard me say no.
Wow. Yeah, so that is exactly the reason why I wanted to go through that little exercise on every show. Is just I know we've talked about it in the past, but a lot of the folks that are listening to this on the new feed may have not heard us talk about it. So let's just dip into it here for a little bit. Why is it that you think top grossing horror movies don't seem to connect? And I'm this is going to be a blanket statement, but I don't mean it to be. I think you guys agree, right? Like, I think my favorite horror movies apparently don't do well in the box office, and the ones that do well in the box office are rarely. It's not that they're ever the case, but are rarely like my favorites. And there's always like that disconnect. And I don't mean to speak for the fandom, but when you follow like enthusiast blogs and stuff like that, a lot of these movies that are box office hits aren't usually brought up or remembered.
Horror doesn't perform at box office,
Right,
For
yeah.
whatever,
or even like critically reviewed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true too.
Well, look at the two of the movies on this list. They have that star power behind them, and that's probably why they made
it's
half of the
important,
money
right?
they made.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to see Johnny Depp as a vampire, apparently, and
Yeah,
a pirate.
I
And
actually could see that being like the start of the movie. Somebody in Hollywood was like, vampires are big, werewolves
Yeah.
are big.
we We need to get Johnny Depp a movie.
Johnny
Right
Depp
up.
looks like a vampire. Let's get him in there.
Makeup will be super easy. Just give him a bottle of wine and he'll keep going in that direction. Horrible.
All right, so let me start. I'll start with my 3 movies. I brought 6, so we can talk about them if
Wow.
either of you guys bring up the other ones. But I'm going to start with the first one, or I'm going to start with the third one. But my first pick is The Possession. Is Oli Bowmetal, director I've never heard of, and I looked him up and I never heard of anything else he's done. It does star Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who has come to fame since this movie. And this is a Jewish themed horror movie. Have either of you seen The Possession?
No,
I have not.
No,
It's pretty good. I liked it quite a
by
bit.
Sam Raimi. Yeah, Rob Tappert.
Apparently, the way I watched it, and I watched it again this week just to get caught up. I watched this when it came out. My wife did not like it when it came out. She liked the second viewing, though. It was funny. She was really into it now, and then she was like, "We've seen this before?" I was like, "Yeah," and you hated it. That's always like a fun thing to be told, right?
Yeah.
But apparently, so you've got Jeffrey Dean Morgan's character. He's going through a divorce with his wife, and he has a daughter and daughters, and they're doing the whole, every other weekend thing. He takes his daughters to a yard sale, and they pick up this possessed box, which like possesses his daughter throughout the movie. And there's all kinds of religious themes and twists, and he goes to the rabbi for consultation, and there's a lot of twisty stuff, and there's locusts, and it's got all kinds of exorcism of Emily Rose stuff that happens like right from the start of the movie. Actually, there's a death like right as the movie begins. In rewatching it, there is definitely a lull that I didn't remember. There's like a lull in like the transition from like the middle of the movie to the final act. There is this lull where they go to a hospital and they're running around and the lights are blinking, flashing, and they're being haunted and stuff like that. On the second viewing, or at least viewing years later, I wasn't as into it as at least I remember. I think I remembered it better than I do. But that being said, even looking at some of the other lists, some of the other items on my list that I was thinking of, like The Innkeepers or Prometheus, if you would even count it, I still think this one gets the nod. It is a very good horror movie. Critically panned. I don't think it's done well. I don't think it's been reviewed well, but I liked it. I think the acting is really good. It does have a really nice way that it's shot, and it's definitely got some spooky thrills. So my third pick for 2012 was The Possession. What about you guys?
Nice.
Here we go. Josh.
Hey, so it's funny. I was going to talk about this at the top, but something I was talking to Lucas about in the Discord was how like we can kind of have blind spots too. Like at least for me specifically, like I look at these lists of movies that have come out, and there's always like 5-6 movies I wanted to see and didn't, and then and things like that. So
it's not
like,
Pokemon. Can't watch them all. It's
right.
That's for sure.
But something that's good about this podcast, well, it's good for our listeners too, but it's also like, it's like even the last 2 episodes, I started taking down lists of movies I need to see. Yeah. So like, it's also like more like opening our own like eyes to other films that we may not be familiar with. That being said, I had a tough time getting 3 picks for this year that I've seen. So
same.
I have a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of 8 movies, right? And that I could definitely say are either that I've seen or wanted to see. So I want to tell you that this week I tried watching 2 films from this list, and they were terrible.
Oh no! I'm scared he's gonna say one that I like.
You might like.
Isn't that the thing?
Like
you clench when you hear that. You're like, oh no!
Yeah.
Please don't be it. Please don't be it.
You might like maybe we'll talk about them at the end. So, based off of my list, we talked about it before. I didn't think I would include Prometheus because I don't necessarily consider it horror. But the more I thought of Alien.
It's crazy because it is an alien movie and it's totally like a horror theme.
There's definitely,
but it's sci-fi.
There's definitely horror aspects to Prometheus, especially with what happens to Rooney Mara's character. It's definitely categorized as horrific. So I put it as my number 3.
Hang on a second.
I haven't seen enough.
If I remember, because we talked about this after the last show when we went off air, didn't you tell me you didn't like it?
I didn't like it as an Alien film.
Ooh, I understand.
As
that.
like a diehard Alien guy, it really let me down Alien wise. Like they really messed with the Forerunners and they really messed with like this lore from
Mhm.
Alien. But as a film, it's not a bad film.
I know a lot of people didn't like it when it came out in theaters. I liked it. And that was
Yeah.
one of the things with me is I always thought it was like a really cool kind of big, grand, epic blockbuster.
Cinematography was pretty good, if I remember. Just had that real, concept art like for Star Wars and stuff, where there's these grand,
Yeah.
large landscapes, and then you see little ships and everything. It just like the whole movie kind of.
I mean,
felt
it's
like
definitely
that. Really
not
big.
Alien, right? Like Alien is so small and but perfect in a lot of ways, but much lesser of a scale. You're not traveling through space and all these different stuff,
Right.
and all, right? But I did like it for what it was. I remember I saw that one in theaters, and I remember that being the thing. A lot of people hating on it, and I was like, oh no, I like this one.
I think there was just so much hype for it that I think people were expecting more aliens-esque.
And I don't
Right, but
follow
it's
like
also-
on a ship.
I don't
Yeah.
follow like the movie news with like actors and directors and stuff. I think as much as other fans. So I just didn't know it, but I could see that because it had a incredible cast and all that. I could see a lot of people being like through the roof for it.
Yeah. Yep. So I mean, it makes my number 3, but only because 2 other movies weren't good.
Okay, I'm
It
excited to
would've
know what
been-
the other 2 were.
Yeah, I'll tell you if you guys even talk about them, which it's very possible that you will.
I was going to
Okay.
say there's probably a good chance that
Uh-oh.
I might. Because my number 3 is something that I barely remember watching. Like I do remember aspects of it, but if I were to tell you exactly what the story was, I don't think I could, or I probably wouldn't get it right. But I remember hearing about this movie because Ethan Hawke is in it, and it seemed like
My number
such a
2.
departure. All right, okay, let's get into it then. Sinister.
Yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
The movie where this writer, if I remember correctly, Ethan Hawke finds a box of
Whole movies.
Super 8s. Yeah, Super 8s. I was going to say VHS, and I knew that wasn't right. Super 8 movies. Yeah, home movies where there was like all these different things going on. I don't remember. Do you remember what some of the movie things were?
Yes.
Was it
so
stalking?
I wrote some stuff down. I got Scott Derrickson, who also directed Emily Rose and the Doctor Strange movie. It came out years later. So the writer moves. He has a history of writing like murder, true crime, solve stuff.
Yes.
He moves into a house where murders had happened. His family, unbeknownst to them, they've done it before. This was one of the ones that I rewatched. They've moved to towns where murders have happened, but he cleverly leaves out the fact that it actually happened in the house. So they're moving in. He goes to the attic. There's nothing in the house at all except for this one box of Super 8 reel movies, and he pulls them down. And the Super 8 reel movies have like these. They have these very open-ended titles like pool party, family get together, park, picnic at the park. And what happens is you put the movies on and you witness a scene. He gets to drinking and he sits down. He wants to watch the movies. It doesn't happen at first either. He kind of lives and meets the cop and everything, and his family gets settled. But curiosity, right, kills the cat. He finally goes and hooks up the movies, and he watches this family hanging out, running around the yard and stuff. And then all of a sudden it shifts, and they're all hanging from a tree, except the missing child. And throughout the movie, he watches other ones, and it keeps happening. Whenever the family is being pictured, they're being filmed, and everybody dies except for the youngest child. And that kind of is the template for the movie that would follow in the second act. But I don't want to speak over or for you, Lucas, so don't you get back in there.
That's excellent. Thank you. You're jogging my memory, which is great because I watched this when it became available on Netflix because I missed it originally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of the if this movie would have came out later or earlier, it would have missed all these one name similar
Insidious
horror movies,
Conjuring,
Insidious, Sinister,
Babadook.
Conjuring, all that stuff. So I think it would have done better, but I remember thinking that it wasn't really going to be that good. And I watched it, and it had me to a point. And like Ethan Hawke is a really good actor, and I appreciated him in this role. And I thought the story was doing so well. And then it kind of gets into the third act, I think was around the time that they start showing the monster, as it were, a little bit too much. The ghoul.
No. His name is Bagul.
Bagul.
So I wrote down one of the fun facts. The writer
Bagul.
who set up this character, who I like. So it sounds like you don't. I think he's really cool looking, and he has a lot of jump scares.
He does.
Bagul was intended to be a sinister take on a Willy Wonka-like character. There's you a fun fact for the movie. So the whole idea is that he seduces the youngest child, and he takes them, to the dark layer, the other world or whatever, and he preys on their soul for strength. And as you ultimately find out in the movie, spoilers for the movie, the youngest kid always kills their family, which I think is a really cool premise. And that happens to Ethan Hawke's family at the end. His youngest daughter kills his family, and he takes her at the end. So I just thought it was cool. I like that final act. I think Sinister, in a lot of the same ways as Insidious, it does kind of set it's like a slower burn type of tension as you start to lead up, and then it just kind of ramps up really fast there at the end, and kind of goes through. I think it's one of those ones that I would usually tell people to try to pay attention to, or don't don't zone out on it, but it does kind of lull you into it. So I could see folks not catching up on so many of those details, but there are some small details like that.
And I think I need to rewatch this movie, because the reason why it ended up at number 3 for me is because I don't remember the story as much now, but I do remember the feeling of being like, this isn't as bad as I heard from other people who I knew at the time, who were like, oh, Sinister, that movie's going to be garbage or whatever. So I put it on, and it's like a delightful surprise. I'm like, hey, this isn't that bad, actually. It doesn't have as bad of a rap as I had heard. And so maybe my bar was set really low, but it definitely, to me, sounds like I need to rewatch it just to see if I still feel that same way. But it's why it made number 3 on my list, is because I still think about it even now, and that's important to me in a movie.
It's better than some of those box office things we read off at the top
That's
of the show. I'll
for
tell you
sure.
that. I'm not here to tell you it's the greatest movie ever. I think you're right. It's a good horror movie in the sense that it really doesn't do anything that I think is new or overly well. It does a lot of the same things a lot of other movies at the time were doing. But that doesn't mean that it was bad. It's definitely, I don't think it was not entertaining. I enjoyed it.
Solid, as they say. Solid. It's good effort.
If you're into horror movies, I think you'll like it.
Exactly.
For fans of the genre. Now, Josh, that was my number 2, so I'll just pass, and we'll kick it over to you for number 2.
Are you familiar with the title Maniac?
I wrote it down on my list, but Josh, I don't like this movie.
You don't like it? Well, I love Elijah Wood in this.
I do too,
role.
And I love how much he wants to be into horror, but nothing he's done. I'm not sorry. I want him to be good, but everything I've watched, I'm like, yeah, no.
I think it checks a lot of boxes for me. It's creepy. It involves mannequins, which is extra creepiness. It involves a guy who's kind of messed up from his childhood and just becomes this. It's almost at points that he doesn't want this at certain parts.
I haven't seen it in many years, so I don't remember much about it, but I want to be clear. I think when I heard about it, I was under the understanding that it was like a remake or an homage to the original Maniac.
It's a remake, yeah. Well, yeah, it's probably more of an homage, I think.
Yeah, but when I remember watching it's not really like the original.
Yeah.
The original's pretty...
It's from the 70s, I believe, so they really had to update some of its...
The original's pretty brutal.
I mean, he scalps people, and it's pretty brutal.
Okay. Like I said, I haven't seen it in many years. Maybe I just don't remember a whole lot about it.
He really takes on that role of this creep, this creep.
Yeah, I remember being creepy. I remember the mannequins and stuff. But the original Maniac, I actually happened to have seen recently via Shudder. So maybe it's just that's more in my mind than the other one. But in the old one, it's definitely kind of almost borderline like a snuff film, like a torture porn. They don't
go as far. Yeah.
That's what I remember. That's my takeaway from the remake.
That's probably part of the era too, because 70s that was when they were taking horror to that like over the line a little bit and testing those limits. And I remember I actually put the original on my need to see list because I had heard, either people love it or hate it, but it's one of those that at the time in the 70s you couldn't get a hold of very easily. There wasn't like
It
you
crosses
can go to
lots of
Blockbuster
boundaries.
and yeah, exactly. So to get a copy or watch a copy of it was pretty difficult. So that really intrigued me. Of course, now, like you said, you watch it on Shutter, so
Yeah.
all you need to do is pay $5 a month or whatever. But so the Elijah Wood reboot or remaster, if you will, I have. Would you? You've seen both,
I haven't seen
Josh?
the original.
You haven't seen the original, okay?
No.
Because I'd be curious. You've seen both, though, Donnie.
I have.
And you prefer the newer one
No.
or the older one? Sorry.
Yes. I don't even want to say that. I don't want to go on record as saying I prefer the old one. I watched the old one. I don't enjoy what I'm watching.
Gotcha.
I understand why people do. It's a boundary crosser. It crosses many of my own boundaries. So I
Gotcha.
get it. I don't like it. But I remember when the new one came out, and definitely after Lord of the Rings, and I also like Elijah Wood and Sin City and all that. And I was like, oh, this is cool. He's really into horror. I've heard him talk about it in interviews and stuff. So I wanted to watch it. And it's not, I don't want to say I did say I don't like it, and that's true. I don't like it. I didn't say it's like awful or bad or anything like that. It's kind of like, some of the other movies that we read off at the top, it's just kind of middling to me. I remember going into it going, oh man, he's going to cross all the boundaries and stuff like the original. That's what I was kind of going to. Remember the time. We're in 2012. Saw and Hostel and everything like that. So I'm thinking
the line's been pushed.
Maniac, like, oh my God. Definitely wasn't that. I came away going like, well, it didn't really pay homage to the original, and it's kind of middling. Just okay.
I certainly like it more for him than I do for maybe the content itself.
Gotcha.
That makes sense.
I would say that. Just
Nothing wrong with
performance.
that.
Performance.
I didn't mean to put you on defense. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I don't
I'm
want
not
anybody to
it's horror.
defend
Like,
their films.
There's so many lines in horror that people very rarely, I think, see eye to eye on every type of horror film.
And as we covered, all of
doesn't bug
us
me at
three,
all.
we have different genres and different like subgenres of things that we like.
You guys, your number ones could be the movies I tried to watch, and that would make sense.
Well. You talked about boundaries really quick. Are there any movies that you guys have ever stopped? Because I've definitely gotten the queasiness. Well, not because they're bad, but because they crossed boundaries. Because I typically won't, I will watch a movie even if it upsets me, because in the back of my head, I always know that it's not real, right?
Sure.
Or at least you would hope. But there have been many times where I've been just like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can finish this movie.
I've turned off several Saw movies because they tend to just take it so far that's the only point, is just to take it that far. And I don't feel like it's doing anything to the story. And I don't feel like in some of those sequels, I don't feel like are good sequels. They're not representative of what the original Saw was. The original Saw was captivating and brilliant in so many ways to the story. And then where they take it, it's like, that's not Saw at all. Like it becomes Hostile. And
they want to one up everything they did previously.
Exactly. Yeah. And it just becomes horror movie sequel. More, bigger, better, more.
See, I regretfully watched The Human Centipede because of the...
That's one I turned off.
I turned off too, because like what you're saying, as bad as that movie was, it's only like, let's push the boundaries even further. And that barely has a story to it at all. It just feels like, let's just piss some people off by making a movie that's disgusting.
Yeah. I didn't turn one off. That
might be
per
the
se.
only one.
I almost turned one off though, and that was Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. It was.
I watched that one.
I don't think that I've ever really gotten queasy at a movie ever. The amount of gore in that film was a little grotesque, and I mean that in a negative way. Like, to be gory, like the first one he made, the remake, was genius. Like, it was so well done. And then Halloween 2, and then of course I read about all the problems he had working on the movie and that his vision wasn't even like realized for it. So that could have something to do with it. But man, like some of the stuff in Halloween 2, I just had a real hard time watching, and
Wow.
It
I
definitely
only
feels
didn't
like
turn off because of Rob Zombie.
it feels like a lot of his. I feel like a lot of his other works show up more in Halloween 2 than his original remake.
Yes.
And I think it's maybe just the original remake is so beloved that you couldn't divert from the path so much.
Right, but you know what you're signing up for House of a Thousand Corpses, right? You know
Right.
what to expect. And
Yep.
Halloween, while it's always been violent,
Yep.
So
in the
got
original
new levels
Halloween
from it.
remake, one of my favorites actually, it's very divisive amongst horror fans. A lot of folks didn't like it. They didn't like the fact they were remaking a classic anyway. I thought Rob Zombie nailed it personally. I love
he
the
killed it,
original.
yeah.
I think it's great. One of my favorite remakes in the horror genre ever, but a lot of people don't, and I understand that. I also turned off Blood Sucking Freaks,
Oh, okay.
which is like a snuff film. You guys probably Shudder does the Joe Bob Briggs drive-ins, and on last season they had Chris Jericho over, and he mentioned his favorite horror movie is called Blood Sucking Freaks, and they watched it. And my wife and I gave it maybe 30 minutes, and we were like, we're turning this trash off. And it was so funny because he brought it up in the sense that he said that that's why he was interested in it, because it was so terrible and it was so awful and it was so trashy that his friends like couldn't believe that it was made, so it's always stuck with him. I just think it's terrible. It is one of the worst things I've like. It's not just crossing borders, although it does. There are times like it does. It definitely does. I can imagine watching it in the 70s being like, what is this? Like way worse than now. But yeah, that's another one for me. I don't do the gore as much as I think a lot of horror fans do, though, to begin with. So I'm not like opposed to gore, but there's definitely like a line that I think I draw a little bit faster than some.
It definitely is a vehicle for being like, all right, now I'm just watching somebody smash gelatin into the floor with a hammer.
It's funny. I don't know where that line is because it's so funny. Like I enjoy a really good scene. Like when I think of some classic scenes or ones that make me feel anything, something. Either I think they're cool for the effect, I think they're funny for like the premise, or I actually think they're grueling and they make me feel compassion or empathy or bad for the character.
Yeah.
In all of those situations, I like it. It's like when it just goes so far beyond, like just to gross me out. That's where I kind of get off the bus.
Yeah.
Personally.
Agreed. Well, we revealed your number 2, Donnie, and that was Josh's number 2. So I guess that's me.
Yep.
All right. Now I'm pretty sure nobody knows what I'm going to talk about next because I was actually surprised to find this on the list. And like Josh, I had a difficult time, more difficult than I thought I was going to, with finding movies that I had actually seen as opposed to heard of, or at least remember slightly. So this movie is a UK movie. It debuted in the United States in 2013, but I'm going with the 2012 here because I had a hard time.
We did this already.
I'm breaking the rules on purpose, but I want to let you know I'm doing it on purpose. I'm sorry. It's okay though, because
this is on my 2013 list. So help me God, Lucas.
I'm sorry. I know it isn't. This was actually a Netflixation back when I was doing that gig, and we watched it for that. And the movie's called Sightseers.
That's a new one for me.
Yeah, I believe it was on. Well, it had to have been on Netflix at some point for me to do it on that show. But United Kingdom movie. It raked in a whopping $61,000 in the United States total when it opened in theaters. It had to have been a limited release.
British Independent Film Award for Best Screenplay.
Yes, it is produced by Edgar Wright. It is a horror comedy.
Wow.
2012 must have been the year of horror comedies because there were a lot of them. But this one's actually good.
And it came out in 2013.
No, it was made and released in its home country in 2012.
This is going on the list.
So this isn't super horror, but it is one of those movies where it takes a turn at some point. So everything seems normal. The story is basically that this guy who's a writer wants to take his girlfriend, I believe, with him on holidays in a RV, something like that. They're going to just kind of drive around. He's going to get some writing done. They're going to see the countryside. And things kind of take a turn. And I don't want to reveal too much because I don't think this movie would be that much fun knowing what the story is. And I have a feeling, since a lot of people haven't seen
Probably
this movie,
haven't seen it, right?
that's the draw. But it's not a massive turn, but it's one of those things where everything seems so normal that what happens next, kind of everything leading up to that point, just kind of builds and builds and builds. It's actually funny in moments, but it's that also juxtaposes well with the other horrible things that happen. So it really sets up a nice narrative where you have this sort of normal feeling everything's going to be fine, and then all of a sudden it takes this turn and you're just like, whoa, okay, cool, so now we're doing this. But it's not offensive or anything. I don't think it'll be too difficult for anybody, even people who aren't super into horror movies, because at the base level of the movie, it's about a couple. And that's kind of really the premise, is these two people who are a little bit like, she's kind of weird. He's sort of this loner writer type guy who has his own issues. And it really just charmed me, I guess, which is weird to say about a horror movie, but it does have that kind of indie feel, but it was just surprisingly good. I picked it out of nowhere. Like, I just was like, hey, we should do this for an episode. We talk about it. We watch it, and I was delightfully surprised. So to find out that this came out in 2012, when it released in its home country, it was surprising to me, because, you get on Netflix, you put on a movie, you don't think about it. You're just like, oh, this is the movie I'm going to watch. I didn't look up when it was released, but I saw it on the list. And
because it's not on my other list.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
I watched the trailer. It looks good.
It's a good one.
And they do show the surprise in the trailer, so you could have mentioned it.
Oh, okay. Well,
don't do it for me, because I want to watch it. I put it on the list.
I won't ruin it for you.
Okay. I mean, I'm sure what we're talking about, you can probably guess sort of what happens.
So I'm going to do my number one. Before I do, I want to mention that I had Maniac, The Innkeepers, which I had never seen. And if you Google horror movies from this year, it comes up a lot. And I watched it this week, didn't like it, so I didn't put it on my list. So
see, I've seen that come up a couple of times, and I kind of steered clear. I had this feeling that it's probably not very good.
It has a lot of good reviews, but yeah, not for me. I also included Prometheus as an option, and The Lords of Salem, which I think I'm not going to mention, but I want to bring it up because I think it deserves some acknowledgement. I think the hipster take, but it is definitely my take too, so I'll join the hipsters, and I think this is Rob Zombie's best original film.
Yeah.
Wow.
I really like The Lords of Salem. I don't think it's... So you guys tipped me off and recommended me to watch The Green Room.
Yes.
And I watched it this year and I liked it. And they're different movies. Like, this is definitely not a slasher, where I think The Green Room definitely is, but they're I feel like they're similar in storytelling and kind of, I guess, the way they're being shot. Mm-hmm. And I really like The Lords of Salem. It has like this witch coven type of overlay with this like metal punk background, and it does a lot of weird things, and it definitely is out there, and it's hard to follow the story like a lot of Rob Zombie movies. But when I think back of all of his movies, I actually think it's one of the better stories that he's told, and I dare say I think this is the best acting Sherry Moon Zombie's ever done. I don't think she's great in many things that she's done, but in this one, I think in this one, in a lot of ways, she carries what can be kind of a convoluted plot. But her plight as like a recovering addict who's being haunted by these weird things that are happening in this coven of witches and things. It's kind of like weirdly perverse or like oddly intriguing, I guess, is like a way. Like, it's strange things are happening and you just kind of want to stick around just to see how it pays off. I don't think the payoff was like super rewarding, but I definitely remember I've only watched it once. I watched it, I think, 2 years ago, and when I watched it, I remember I watched the whole thing because I was just kind of
Involved.
into where it was, involved. Like, it just kind of got me in a way that most horror movies don't, if you're sitting there and just kind of blindly watching people murder folks. So I've heard other people on Twitter, I have like a whole horror list that I've talked about. I've seen, since then, people prop up the Lords of Salem. I believe it was universally destroyed like when it came out. Most people hated it.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you don't count Halloween, which I wouldn't, it's not his film, right? He just remade a film that was already there, and he did a great job. Don't get me wrong. I think the casting was excellent, but it's not his movie. This is his movie, and I think it's pretty good. It's like solid. It's good. It's not awful. The Devil's Rejects and House of 1,000 Corpses, those are hard recommends for people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You got to know who you're recommending it to first.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Right. And I don't think The Lords of Salem is. So
Wow.
I wanted to bring it up. But the number one movie on my list, and I would imagine everybody's list, because I think it blows away the competition for 2012, is The Cabin in the Woods.
Here we go.
By Drew Goddard, who did, and help me if I didn't do my homework right, Daredevil and Cloverfield and World War Z. And also
and
Buffy.
Martian.
Was written or co-written by Joss Whedon from the MCU and Avengers and stuff.
Yeah, and
Yep.
Firefly and other things.
The fun fact that I put on here is it stars Chris Hemsworth and Anna Hutchinson. The fun fact that I put on here is they basically did it. They wanted to do a horror movie as an FU to the torture porn trends that we were talking about just recently.
Yeah.
So they wanted an old-fashioned horror movie that was self-aware and poked and prodded at the cool things that were in fad. And what they ended up making was a very familiar plot. A group of kids, stereotypical genres, all go to a cabin in the woods, right? Mm-hmm. And from the moment you start the movie, you start seeing some things that are happening. You've got the guy from Billy Madison, and you've got the other guy, I forget his name, but there are these things happening in offices and stuff, and you don't quite know what's happening until you do, and this movie takes a gigantic turn into a different place, and it is a roller coaster of a ride. I think it's one of the best horror movies of the decade.
For sure.
It's absolutely my number one movie of 2012. I would have a hard time taking any of these other options. And to be honest, none of these other options are in the ballpark. Like, this is of the decade, and all of those just make the list of the year. This is one of the best represents of the entire decade because it's smart and funny and dumb, and it takes all the dumbness of the genres and it plays on them, and you're like, oh, it's stupid, and then they turn it in an expertly smart way. The only thing I won't say about it, because I think it's funny, but my wife absolutely hates the ending. She's like, well, that's stupid. Where you have the Titans really come and the world ends, and I'm like,
but it can't end in any other way. That's the problem.
So I told my wife, I was like, you know what? More horror movies should end with the end of the world than not.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? Like, we don't have enough horror movies that end with the, in fact, end of the world. And based on a lot of premises that we see and adopt in horror movies, like, it's pretty realistic. It should happen. Yeah. So you got the giant spiders, like that never gets old, and the giant snakes and stuff. And it's crazy. And I think their attempt to revitalize slashers, I think, in a way, and it's very much like The Evil Dead meets Shaun of the Dead, and it's just it's really, really good. Top class for me. So I'll stop talking and let other people talk.
I actually watched this recently. It was one of the first things I did because I knew we were going to be talking about it. One of the first things I did after we wrapped up the last show. And I'm glad I did because I had seen it when it first came out, probably when it released on DVD or something like that, not in theaters. And it was one of those things where you're watching it with a group of friends and you're not really paying that much attention.
Definitely saw this in theater with my friends from high school. We all went together. My wife, like, we went as a gang. I remember we had like 8 or 9 chairs in the theater, and that sticks out for me. That's not a norm. That's that's an extra special occasion.
Nice. Yes. Well, when you're at somebody's house and doing that, but it's like doing that, but at somebody's house, the likelihood of everybody actually watching the movie instead of wondering like where the next drink is coming from is, completely different thing. So I gave it another watch because I felt like it was due that, because I did remember some of the things from it, but I'm glad I did because, you're right. It is a very good example of how to do a parody and not just be like, hey, let's make fun
Not be a
of,
scary movie.
yeah, scary movie. Exactly. That's like the lowest amount of effort I feel when
Yeah.
it comes to that type of thing. You want to be smart, and this movie is smart. It does have a few trappings from the genre, and I give it a pass because I don't know what else you would do. But there is the spooky monsters who come out of nowhere, where it's like Jack in the Box. They're just there for some reason, for the sake of a werewolf coming out of the shadows or whatever. And whether you like that or not, the sensibility, my sensibility,
You're speaking my language.
Okay.
So I got Mr. Cinema here, and he's like, "Where's the plot direction for this?" And I'm like, "Let's do it more."
I can handle it if it gets set up, and it is a little bit, but I don't know. I expect a little bit more than a giant werewolf hiding in the shadow, somehow snuck down a flight of stairs into
What
a
is Lloyd
room.
Christmas's motivation in this scene?
Exactly. I need to know.
He needs to get to Mary Samsonite. He has to get there.
They didn't set up this Hellraiser character to serve a role in the movie. What is this? Now we're just
Pinhead.
making things up as
Why
we
isn't
go.
this movie called Pinhead?
Pinhead needs his own origin story movie. So I don't know though, but Chris Hemsworth's death, his character's death, is one of the most funniest things I've seen in a horror movie in so long. I remember that was the one thing that stuck out in my mind from before that made me like want to watch the movie again. Is how he dies. It's just equally terrifying because you learn about things that are,
It's
you see
shockingly funny.
Yes,
Yeah.
but so unexpected, and it just really encompasses the entire movie. What comes of it.
He literally goes out in like flames of glory. Like what a
he gets
better
on
way
his-
for him to exit stage left.
He gets on his horse and rides, and then immediately explodes.
Oh,
You know,
so
it's just
good.
like what? It is good, and I appreciated the fact that I got to watch it again. So that's because I probably wouldn't have if we hadn't done the show.
Yeah, this is horror comedy done well. It's shades of Office Space, shades of The Truman Show. And for Josh in here, I wanted to give you guys another fun fact. The special effects, the costumes, special makeup, prosthetics, and everything were done by horror royalty Heather Langenkamp and her husband. So they run an effects studio. So if you guys didn't know that, that's pretty cool. She was running around on set.
Are those the ones? Are those the team that like didn't know what the hell they were doing at first when they got like their first job or something?
I didn't look that much into it. I was just looking at the movie and I saw it and I was like, that's a really cool, fun fact to know. Like, just think you had Nancy on set, like dolling all these people up and stuff. It's like, that would be, if I was put in that loop, like here you are doing a horror movie and you've got Nancy like doing your makeup. Like, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Josh, go ahead. Please, sir.
You guys nailed it all for the most part.
Nailed it.
If people haven't seen this, I don't want to spoil anything, but there's a very cool reveal that most people didn't know who like the big bad, if you will, in this movie is.
Yeah, that's
which
true.
blew me away when I first saw it. And it's like royalty in its own right, you know.
You hear her voice earlier in the or his. Crap. It's 2012. Come on.
Yeah, I know. But we might be turning some people onto this because I don't know that we just talk about like subgenres of horror. Like there could be people not even aware of
There's
this film.
kids.
How
who-
this wasn't the
it's-
top boxing list, like this blows me away. This movie is so much better than all of those movies that you offered.
Yeah.
It's probably wasn't marketed well. Or
They're not
something.
close.
Well, don't forget, we thought it came out in 2011. So maybe people didn't know what year it was.
They
when
were
it came
like,
out.
when do I go to the theater? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. It definitely is like wicked tongue in cheek, but I actually really appreciate horror movies like this, and I don't want to list one that's going to come up in a future episode, so I'll keep that spoiler free. But like we just talked about, Tucker and Dale versus Evil, like there's room for these movies, these comedy horror movies in this genre because they still keep what's pure about horror, and that is the scares and the ghouls and the
Kind of the roller
jumps,
coaster ride
like it
of a
keeps
horror
all
movie.
of that. Everything is super sincere and authentic. So like it's not like Scary Movie, right? They're not trying to
Those are
make
cheap
fun
laughs
of
on the thing.
horror.
But what I think you're talking about is what I was just about to say in response to you is, if folks don't like these type of movies, I mean, all I have to say is if it was good enough for Wes Craven, then it's good enough for me and for us as fans. Like he did it multiple times, and if it was good enough for him to do it, then by all means do it. It's adopted.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, I mean, if you go all the way back to Nightmare on Elm Street, the originals, there's so much comedy in those films. Like it's there. So you kind of need it because you know what it does? It makes those scares 10 times more effective because
Yep.
you're
You
super
want to take somebody
loose.
on a ride, you know?
Yeah,
Well,
but
that's
you're like
that's
laughing
nice.
and your body just relaxes as you're laughing. And like, ugh, you're like
Well,
your whole body clenches.
it gives you a mental palate cleanse.
Yeah.
You know, you can't just have, it doesn't matter what genre it is, you can't have the same thing over and over. Your brain just doesn't care after a while. That's when you start checking your phone, and
Yeah,
you
and
don't
I think
want that.
it captivates your attention to kind of do a lot of different stuff and keep you invested.
Yeah.
Yep.
Before we move on, can I regale you guys with some other movies that we may
Yes,
have
and
not
I
have
wanna know
talked
Josh-
about?
Yeah,
Josh's
I
too
got
as
some I
well.
want to mention too.
Okay. Paranormal Activity got to its 4th entry in the series. No trilogy. No, we're going to keep going. We're going to run this train into the ground, folks. The Devil
Which one was that
Inside. It's been 5 years since the disappearance of Katie and Hunter, and a suburban family witnessed strange
4,
events in their
Donnie.
neighborhood.
4. That was
4.
not very good. 5
I-
was the masked ones, right?
Yeah, but
That was
sure.
wasn't that
This one was called.
that's when they started getting subtitles.
It's closer than you think was the tagline for this one.
I think it was 5. I'm looking up.
After 5 they get
the marked
like,
ones. I'm sorry, I said
The
masked.
marked ones.
The
yeah.
marked ones. I like that.
That's what I
one.
thought you were talking
People
about.
hate it, and I liked it. I thought it was great.
And then the other one, the 6th one, has a title like that too, like the masked one or marked ones. Now I'm saying it. Thanks.
The Mask.
The Mask. The Devil
Somebody
Inside.
stop me. Sorry.
The Devil Inside bombed completely. Metascore of 18. That's the one with the poster where the woman's putting her lower lip down and it has a upside down cross.
It's not good.
Awful. Resident Evil Retribution. Also 39.
I'm gonna rewatch those. I just bought the collection. I need to rewatch. I've never watched. I've only watched.
I've only seen the first one.
I've only watched one, and I don't even remember which one I watched. So I'm gonna rewatch them in order.
The first one was decent, I remember, but it was also a long time ago. So maybe it does bear rewatching. And lastly, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
Yeah.
I'll never forget. I was in the theater to watch something else, and an ad for
thank
this
God.
came up. Yes, and the ad for this came up, and a young girl, probably 12 maybe, said to her friend, whispers, "Did this really happen?" Not even funny. Like, not even being, like, not a joke at all. I'm like,
believe it.
oh no. Poor girl. So yeah, really a year of continuing the trend, but also trying to get some of those jokey parody-esque movies in there. So what a strange time.
Hey, you, Josh.
Josh, yeah, did I miss any of yours?
You missed the 2 that I watched. Well, that I attempted to watch.
Oh boy. What were they?
VHS
Ah.
2 or 1?
1.
Okay.
This movie, you're talking about snuff films, it's just gross. It's creepy.
I was just about to ask. That's the Brad Miska movie. He runs
It's-
Bloody Disgusting. He created
Is
a
it?
movie. Yeah.
That
That's the
makes
one where they
sense.
go in the house, right? And they find all those tapes and they keep watching them.
Well, yeah, but it's these kids who get a kick out of filming attacks on women walking through parking structures and pulling their shirts down and
That doesn't age well.
breaking into houses and then basically trying to date rape these girls.
Kinda.
And you can see where it's going. Like, it's going to take this turn to like, hey, this one girl, she's weird and she's going to kill you.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's right.
Um,
I've seen it too, but I don't remember.
It's just-
most of it.
I liked it, but I think I like it more for the story of
Yeah.
how indie it was and things like that. I don't think it's a great
Definitely
movie,
indie.
but I thought it was a cool story that I remember kind of behind it, kind of like Blair Witch. Like I got more into knowing how it was created and the fact that it found some success.
Yeah, and then Silent Hill Revelation.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to see Sean Bean's worst acting he's ever done in a film ever, probably worse than his first movie ever, no matter what age he was, watch this movie and don't watch it. Just watch Lord of the Rings again. Don't watch this movie.
I mean, I loved the original Silent Hill. Not great, but my goodness.
Mitchell was back, at least at the beginning, and I was like, oh, maybe there's some hope. Because they got her to come back, but you can even tell that she didn't want to be back.
Yeah. Well, that project, what a letdown. And then Kit Harington, right, is in it as well.
You know, I didn't get that far.
Oh,
if
okay.
he was in it.
He shows up eventually, and it's just a mess.
And then John Dies at the End was on my short list.
Yeah. Yeah.
I need to go back to that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Paul Giamatti is a genius, and he really elevates that movie. I don't know how they got him, but that's it for me. Everything else we touched on: Lords of Salem, Sinister, Maniac, Prometheus, all that.
Okay. Well, that's going to do it for us on this show and for us on 2012. But we hope that you stick with us on the next episode next week as we dive into 2013. Which, little hints, guys, I've got a lot of movies on this list.
Big year for Donnie.
Big year. There's a lot of stuff here. I'm excited. So we hope you come back and join us in 2013. But until then, this is the end, friends.
Hi, I'm Chucky, and I'm your friend to the end. Heidi ho! Ha ha ha!